Welcome back to Over the Horizon. Today I'm joined by Mark Yusko, founder, CEO, and CIO of Morgan Creek Capital. Mark, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thanks for having me on, Joe. It's been a long time coming, and excited to sit down and chat with you.
Absolutely. Lots going on in markets today. Obviously, we have an FOMC meeting coming up, but I'd like to begin with your background. This is the first time you and I are actually speaking, and it's the first time that you've been on the show. So I want to get a window into your background. You founded Morgan Creek Capital back in 2004 after leading the UNC endowment. Can you talk about some of the key experiences that shaped your approach to investing through your experiences at the endowment, then moving in and founding Morgan Creek?
Yeah, absolutely. I say I don't do short well, Joe. But I'll try.
All right.
I'm usually long-winded, as people would remind me, especially my wife. No, I mean in a nice way. She reminds me. But I'll give you the shortest version. So, I'm a left coaster. I grew up on the left coast in Seattle. I would joke most of my friends don't work anymore because they went to work for this little company called Microsoft. But the formative part of my experience, both in life and then in work, actually revolves around, I say, the story of tech. So the mainframe was invented in 1954. My dad was one of those guys who sold and installed mainframe computers in businesses, primarily hospitals. Then I came along in 63. And there was this little innovation out. And at that time, the center of the universe was actually up near you, up on Route 128 in Boston. Everything, DEC, Unisys, Wang, all that stuff was the center of the universe. And then there was an innovation out in Silicon Valley at Fairchild Semiconductor, and everything shifted to Palo Alto. So the center of the universe shifted out to the West Coast. I was, like I said, growing up in Seattle. And little companies like AMD and Intel were formed in 68. And then there was this boom in semiconductors, and suddenly big computers went to small computers. Then in 82, innovation around this thing called the personal computer. And, Steve Ballmer's mom famously said, "Honey, why would you work for that company? No one would ever want a computer in their house," quoting a guy, again, out near you at DEC, saying no one would ever want a computer in their house. Well, yeah, he has 18 billion reasons he was right. Mom was wrong. And again, most of my friends don't work anymore, but I'd always defend myself saying, if you ever seen the picture of the original Microsoft 11, you wouldn't have worked for them either. Now they're multi-billionaires and I'm not, so I shouldn't make fun of them, but it's kind of funny. And so in 1996, this gets to my work life. So, and it's always 14 years. Now, why is it always 14 years? Well, it has to do with young people. It's half a generation, and young people, kind of every half generation, invent stuff because they don't know what they don't know. And they're eager and ambitious and creative. And so there was this innovation around this thing called the internet. And I was working at my alma mater at Notre Dame up there. We had this chance to invest with some venture capital folks down in Palo Alto, Sequoia and Kleiner Perkins, Caulfield Byers, when it was still called Kleiner Perkins, Caulfield Byers. I always feel sorry for Perkins, Caulfield, and Byers because no one talks about them. They just call it Kleiner. And I'll never forget this. They invested in this little company called Google. And I remember talking to our board in 1994 or 5, whatever it was, saying, that's a dumb name. Like now it's a verb, right? And like, okay, fine, it's a dumb name. And said, and why would you invest in the 21st search engine, right? You got Ask Jeeves, you got Web Crawler, you got Alta Vista. What do we need another one for? I said, well, they actually don't search the web. Right? Think about it. If you type a question into a command line, it's not like they go search the whole web for your information. What Google did is they indexed the web so they know exactly where to send you. I'll give you a silly example. So during lockdowns, my son and I started playing Pokemon Go. And that was the gateway drug into playing other games. I got a Nintendo Switch with him, and then I started playing Monster Hunter. But the newest game right now is this Pokemon Legends ZA. And, this new DLC dropped last night. And I don't know where all the special stuff is, but now I can ask a question. And everyone else is asking the same question. It sends me right to where that information is. No wasted time. Well, anyway, I told you I don't do short well. But the formative experience was we put 500K
Mhm.
into this little company called Google, and we took out 200 million. Like there should be a quad at Notre Dame called the Google Quad because it funded a lot of things. And we've done that in other businesses. And so then in 1998, I left and came down here to North Carolina to run the endowment here. And we continued in other tech companies, but this idea of investing in tech innovation. So 14 years later, now 2004 comes along. I formed Morgan Creek. It's 2010. And I remember being actually back in Seattle at a family office, Craig McCaw, famous cellular pioneer, his family office. And I asked the guy, do you think the mobile net is going to be as big as the internet, right? The internet created 2 trillion of value, Intel, Microsoft, et cetera. And he said, Mark, are you joking? Ask me if they want a computer, like whatever. Ask them if they want a phone. They're like, yeah, I already got 2. I don't need another one. So yeah, the mobile net was bigger, 5 trillion of value in Web 2. So now fast forward to 2024, like today, and we have this truth net, as I call it, which is where we're swapping trust with truth with blockchain technology and Bitcoin behind me. So anyway, that's the long answer to say my formative experience was investing in all asset classes, the endowment model of investing, focusing a lot on venture capital, innovation as an asset class. There are only 4 asset classes: stocks, bonds, currencies, commodities. That's it. Everything else is just a combination of those 4 things, like A, T, C, and G in DNA. There's only 4 building blocks, and it makes everything in the world different. It's amazing. So if you think about that, that was the formation, and Notre Dame and then UNC and then bringing the endowment model through Morgan Creek Capital Management. But then in 2013, I got approached by a buddy, and like I was super lucky. At North Carolina, my mentor was Julian Robertson, famous hedge fund manager, Tiger Management. And he kind of took me under his wing and helped me learn a lot of stuff. But most importantly, I got the privilege to invest in everyone who ever left Tiger to start their new fund, whether that was Lee Ainsley at Maverick or Steve Mandel at Lone Pine or John Griffin at Blue Ridge Capital or this guy Dan Moorhead at Pantera Macro. And so we funded him, had a hedge fund. And then in 2013, he called me up and said, hey, I'm shutting down the fund. I want to talk to you. I'm like, sure. Have dinner with my friend. Great. Dan, why would you give back $1 billion at 2 and 20? So I'm going to spend the rest of my career in blockchain and Bitcoin. And look, in 2013, I was not running drugs on Silk Road. I was not a cryptography student. I had heard of Bitcoin, but I didn't really understand it. But blockchain, I got, because blockchain is an operating system for the distributed internet of everything. The same way that mainframes ran on COBOL and Fortran, the microcomputers ran on Spark, personal computers ran on DOS and Windows. The internet runs on TCP/IP. We're using it right now, voice over IP. These things run on iOS and Android, and now the future will run on blockchains. That all made sense. So I invested in his infrastructure fund, and that's been great. It's like 17x or something. But I should have put the money in the Bitcoin fund. That's up 350x. But I didn't. But I did do some work. And in 2014, I told you I don't do this is a really long answer.
No,
so
good.
in 2014, I had the aha moment about Bitcoin. And I wrote to my clients. And I used to write these super long letters. My longest was like 90 pages. This one was 41 pages, first quarter 2014. One paragraph saying, I think you should put a little bit of money in Bitcoin. I got hate. I had clients say, we'll fire you. You're an idiot. Don't talk about magic internet money. Now I joked the next paragraph was about Saudi equities, which I will argue is more objectionable than Bitcoin. But no one cared about that, but they didn't want to hear about Bitcoin. Now, from March to September, price went from $500 to 186. I'm like, yeah, they were right. And then literally 8 weeks later, it was $1,000. I'm like, no, there's something here. And so I really doubled down. I wrote this very long thing called Digital Gold Rush, and I had the aha moment. And so I started down the path, and in 2017, I met these two young guys, Pomp and Jason, and they said, "Hey, let's start a fund." I'm like, "Guys, we can't just start a fund out of nowhere." Like, "Sure we can. There's no competition. There's Pantera, there's Blockchain Capital, and we'll be number 3." So we started Morgan Creek Digital in 2017, went out to raise a fund, and we just got super, super lucky, right? We found these two CIOs at Fairfax County who believed in the vision. They gave us a couple big checks, and we raised a fund, and that fund's done pretty well. And now we're on our 4th fund. And anyway, so that wasn't a very short answer, so I apologize.
No, that's all right. 12 minutes, but it was great. It was action packed and it gave a lot of context to me and also the viewers. So thank you so much for that. And that what you just said kind of speaks to one of your recent tweets. And when you were talking, it made me recall it. You wrote, "Want to be a great investor, stay relevant. The biggest investing risk is not venture capital, it's obsolescence. A portfolio of safe blue chips faces existential risk from disruptors they can't see." And then this is the kicker: exposure to innovation as an asset class is your hedge against irrelevance. I think that perfectly sums up effectively the theme of the story that you just gave.
No,
Walking
absolutely.
through.
And it's why my pin tweet on Twitter is the greatest wealth comes from investing in innovation. But in order to do that, you have to invest in something you believe in before everyone else even understands it. And you'll be mocked and ridiculed for your non-consensus action. The key is non-consensus, but it's totally worth it. And, I said there are 4 asset classes: stocks, bonds, currencies, commodities, but there is a 5th. Innovation is an asset class because innovation creates all those other things. And every innovation that comes up creates new things. And, I love the consternation we're going through now of AI is going to kill all the jobs. Like, yes, AI is going to kill a lot of jobs, the same way that the steam engine killed a lot of jobs, the same way that air travel killed a lot of jobs, the same way that the automobile killed a lot of jobs. We don't need street sweepers anymore. Imagine this was your job. Your job in New York City was to push horse poop to the side of the road, and it would stack up like 5-6 feet high. They actually built sidewalks 10 feet high. So if you look at the stoops of buildings in downtown New York, they're 10 feet off street level. Well, the sidewalks were 8 feet. Now imagine having a couple cocktails and walking on that and falling into the steaming pile of poop. So that was an upgrade, right? We don't need those jobs. And we found new jobs: car repair people and traffic people. And here's the funny thing: all the jobs have been wiped out. We have more jobs today than any time in human history. It's just a fact. And yes, we go through waves of unemployment. And this will come back to the question we're going to have about what should the Fed do today and how are they going to make their decision. But ultimately, innovation drives everything. When I was growing up, it was not an option to be a podcaster or an influencer. Right? Now, if you ask my son, who's 14, so we have a unique family. We have 2 older kids, and then we have a caboose. And so we're getting to do it all again. And we are much better parents the second time. Not that we were bad the first time. We were inexperienced. Now we actually know some stuff. But if I asked him what he wants to be, actually, I'll tell you one funny story about this. This is actually true. So when the first 2 came along, my wife stayed home, and that was great. But she was working when the 3rd one came along. So he had a babysitter. His babysitter was from Argentina. She spoke solamente español to Will since he's 5 weeks, so he's fluent. I'm not. I can't speak Spanish. So I use Google Translate, back to Google, and I say, "All right, Will, for dinner we had mashed potatoes and gravy. How do you say that?" And he'll tell me in Spanish. And I said, "All right, when I grow up, I want to be a fireman." This was like 5 years ago when he was 9. And he said, "No, Dad, I want your job. I'm going to be the head of Morgan Creek." I'm like, "Okay, smart guy. What we try to do is we try to buy things today that people are going to want tomorrow. So what would you buy?" And without batting an eyelash, it's crazy. He says, "Computers with holograms." I'm like, "I'm out. You're the boss. I'm going to work for you." I'm like, "Where did that come from?" He said, "Oh, I saw it in one of my cartoons. I thought it was cool." I'm like, wow. Okay, you can watch that cartoon. That is good. Video games don't rot the brain, right?
That's excellent. He just one upped you on the innovation radar right there. Computers with
Exactly.
holograms. Yeah, we may not have them yet, but we certainly do have quantum computing. I have a couple of questions about that as well. But first things first, I want to chat the FOMC meeting in a couple of hours. It seems every single FOMC meeting, people think it's the most important one. It's the most consequential one. It's kind of funny at this point. Consensus.
I had brown hair when it wasn't important. In fact, I can recall a day when I did not know the names of the central bankers. And I'm stealing this from a friend. He said, I long for those days to return. Like, life was way better when we did not know the names of central bankers. Full stop.
Yeah. When it wasn't such an important moment to know the thinking and every move of this unelected group of bureaucrats sitting around in a
And
circle
in what
determining the price of
world
money.
has it ever made sense to do price controls? There's no world, not rent controls, not minimum wages, not there, setting the price of money by human beings, old white guys, is just a bad idea. And there's never been an example of price fixing that's been good. Not one. People can't come up with one. And yet we hang on every word. Oh, what tie is he wearing? Oh, how is he carrying? Is he carrying his briefcase in his left hand or his right hand?
What's his opening line? Does he say good morning before he starts or good
Yeah.
afternoon?
Oh my God. It's
It's
crazy.
completely insane. Yeah, no, the fact that these things are so important, and I've said it several times before, it really is a testament to how far we've fallen. Um, but anyway, so consensus right now is a 25 basis point rate cut. We have this interesting dynamic of a K-shaped economy, and this has been exacerbated since 2020, where upper income earners are doing extremely well because they own a lot of assets, and lower income earners aren't doing very well because of price inflation that has outstripped their wages, and they don't own a lot of assets. So a
You
lot
might
of
say, Joe, that that actually might have been the plan, right? I mean, if you were a skeptic, you might say, wow, if we lock down the economy, then the people who own the stuff are going to make a ton of money. And the people who can't get out of their apartments or homes and can't do anything probably do less well. And then what we'll do, we'll use this, you know, crisis as cover for the cult of Kelton, maybe the dumbest person on the planet. Like, I've never met Stephanie. I shouldn't speak ill of other people, but she's pretty dumb. And look, economics is called the dismal science for a reason, because there's nothing scientific about it. It's just silly narrative that then gets exaggerated by, people in ivory towers who've never actually worked. Long story short, she convinced everybody, oh, you can print as much money as you want with no ramification. That's just silly. And so, but they used the lockdowns to print, and this is crazy. Since 2020, 80% of all the money in the history of the United States was created. I mean, just think about that. We've been a republic for almost 250 years. Republic. Yeah, I said republic, and that's the key word. We're a republic. So 245 years to print 20% of the money supply. And now in 5 years, 80% of the money supply. If you do that, like I joke, I'm sitting in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and people tell me that my house has doubled in value. Like, my house did not grow. It did not get more efficient. It's actually wearing out, right?
I didn't
Because I'm
redo the
25
floors or
years old.
replace the roof.
I got to put money in. Yeah, exactly. We had flying squirrels, like that chewed their way in and they're peeing all over I mean, bad stuff happens because things wear out. And so I have to put money into it. And now I actually got another leak in the ceiling the other day. So it is what it is, but it didn't get more efficient and grow. What happened is the money got worse. And this is why we Bitcoin. This is why we want to own assets that can't be printed. And so this idea that we have this fixation on people who literally can, with a push of a button, because it used to be you had to go to the printing press and fire it up and print off some sheets of paper, and actually it's not even paper, it's linen. But now they can push a button and create money. And even freaking Elon, whether you love him or hate him, sometimes he says stuff that's so dumb just for engagement. But he jumped on this whole UBI, and AI, right? Everyone's AI. Everybody, no matter what you do, now everything's an AI company. I'm like, guys, AI has been around since 1955. This is not a new idea. Like, I'm old enough. 1980 was the year of AI. Time magazine picture of a rocket ship was in Intel stock. The previous decade had gone up 20-fold because they were going to change AI. And we got Clippy. That was it. Now everybody's excited, and we put a $500 billion price on OpenAI, which incinerates cash at 8 to 12 billion per year. Why would I pay money for a company that incinerates cash? I don't really understand. And that's not that ChatGPT is not a perfectly good tool. It's nice. I use it a lot. Although actually I don't use it that much. I use DeepSeek. DeepSeek's way better on every measure. In fact, here's how bad it is. I know I'm going all over the place, but this one really pissed me off. So we invest in what we call the ABDCs of the digital age: AI, blockchain, chips, and data. Okay. The fundamental building blocks. Remember ATCG? So we do the ABCDs. I know. Cute. In the building blocks of the digital age. And so we're making an investment in this AI company called Reflection.ai. And so I asked ChatGPT, well, what can you tell me about Reflection.ai? Never heard of a company with that name. I'm like, really? I asked it again. Nope, I see no information. So I go over to DeepSeek, and I got 17 paragraphs of how great this company. I'm like, are you kidding me? I don't want to live in a world where the data is controlled by our access point. Like, if I type something into Google, I'm relatively sure that it's going to give me what I ask for. Now, I have to sift through it used to be the first 2 lines were sponsored. Then it became like the first page, and now I got to go down to the second page. But once I get past all the sponsored, it actually does give me what I ask for. But if OpenAI can just aggressively say, nope, that doesn't exist because that competes with me. And what it is Reflection.ai is an American version of DeepSeek. So this is my words, not theirs. They reverse engineered DeepSeek, right, which is an open weight, open source model as opposed to the closed weight models. Now we accuse the Chinese of doing this. And like, what the Chinese are way ahead of us in AI. 90+% of the citations on AI come out of China. They're doing all the innovation. I'm totally fine. In an open source world, copy paste is really quite useful. Anyway, but the idea that they would screen it, and I don't know if you remember this story a couple weeks, maybe it was a month ago, when OpenAI said, hey, we have a new browser. And someone typed in, hey, show me pictures of Hitler. And it's like, no, I won't do that. Like, are you serious? Now we're just one step away from, not only is it wrong that the tool won't do what we ask, that's censorship, but worse, we're only one step away from, oh, and by the way, I've reported you to the proper authorities. Like, that's a dystopian nightmare that I don't want any part of. Anyway, that's a long way from the Fed, but I digress.
No, you're good. And really, the only things keeping us from that are the protections that we have as a constitutional republic. Those same protections aren't afforded to those in the United Kingdom. And you're seeing this exact kind of crackdown over there that you just described.
Joe, that is such a great point, an incredible point. I mean, people are going to jail, right? Literally going to jail for tweeting. It's crazy.
It's getting crazy. Anyway, so consensus is 25 bips. Do you think that's the right move or not the right move? It's kind of...
we talked off air. I think it's the wrong move, in the sense that, well, with the caveat that I think the Fed should be abolished, like ETF, Rudy Havenstein on Twitter, it's his term. I just borrowed it. Picasso said, good artists borrow, great artists steal. So I stole it directly from Rudy. But I think the Fed was created to create the K-shaped economy, right? The Fed was created to steal from the masses and give to the rich. That's why the Fed exists. It was created by a bunch of rich people. Okay. And there's a whole book written about it. And Amory Aldrich was not a good man. And anyway, but from 1776 to 1913, a dollar was worth a dollar. It's interesting. Now, it had a little fluctuation around a depression, way worse than the Great Depression, and a war, worse than the World Wars. So, but it rebounded. And so for 1776, 1913, a dollar's worth a dollar. Today, that dollar is worth about 2.5 cents. That is inflation, which is not good for you. I mean, we've been sold a bill of goods that inflation is good for you because your wages go up a little bit and your house goes up a little bit. No, that's theft. Inflation is theft. It's theft because in what world would over 30 years, half of my purchasing power taken away be a good world? That's silly. Now, if you're wealthy enough to put money in assets that appreciate at least that much, or maybe even faster with leverage, then you can win. And that's why the K-shape, the poor get poorer and the rich get richer. But the Fed managing interest rates shouldn't be a thing. The market should determine interest rates. But that said, should they do anything? If we're growing at 3.5%, now this is where I'm going to contradict myself. So on the surface, if we're growing at 3.5%, there's no time in history where we've cut interest rates. That just doesn't make any sense, right? You cut interest rates when things are getting worse. But you mentioned before we started talking that, and I think appropriately so, but job growth is slowing. And if you look at certain parts of the economy, it doesn't look as good. Well, yeah, because 100% of that 3.5% is just AI data center build out, which again is a Ponzi in that there's this circular problem of everybody buying stuff from each other and selling it back to each other. So that's the first problem. But then there's this accelerated depreciation nonsense where they're allowed to depreciate 100% of what they spend in the first year, even though the thing's going to last for decades. It's just dumb, and it's an accounting gimmickry. It's no different than revenue recognition. Like, how can using stock options to pay your employees be income to a company? That's an expense in any way you look at it, but not in modern accounting. And, back to the dismal science of accounting, of economics, Lord Keynes, John Kenneth Galbraith, not Lord Keynes. John Kenneth Galbraith in the 30s talked about this, and he called it the bezel. So the bezel, which is where embezzlement comes from, the bezel is theft, right? And companies, they push the limits, and then they maybe cross the line, and they don't get caught. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll do a little more, and I'll push it a little more. And so the stealing goes on until there's a cathartic, hey, I caught you. And then we have a collapse, and then it starts over. And so that's why we have these long wave cycles, about 30 years, of increasing theft. And today we have the highest discrepancy between non-GAAP, like generally accepted accounting principles, and, stuff that we see. And so there's all this nonsense of accounting wizardry that makes people think that things are good, when in reality they're not. So from that standpoint, maybe 25 basis points is warranted. But then you got the people, including my former partner, not my former partner, still my partner, but we're not actively engaged as like we used to be. But, Pomps saying, oh, just go ahead, 50 basis points. No. Printing money for the sake of printing money is a bad idea because it exacerbates the problem. It doesn't make the problem better. And so but it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is the people who control these decisions are rich. Like, everyone's seen the thing, okay? AOC, negative net worth before she got in, and now she's a decamillionaire, right? Elon, whatever her name is, $9,000 net worth, now 30 million.
Mhm,
Nancy Pelosi. I mean, and both sides of the aisle, it's not just left, it's just all of them are corrupt and bad.
mhm.
And my favorite was, and again, not to pick on one side, but she's the one that said it. Nancy, she was up doing this thing, and there's an ETF that tracks her insider trading,
Yeah.
and it's outperformed everything. But someone said, Nancy, do you think it's kind of morally right that you're trading on information that you control as the head of this committee? She says, well, of course, that's part of my compensation. I'm
Oh
like,
my goodness.
Martha Stewart went to jail. Like, what she did, it's not even because she didn't even do it. I mean, yeah, she gave her money to the guy and she didn't ask him.
But
And
it pales in comparison to what gets done on a daily basis
oh
in
no,
DC.
daily basis, daily basis. But anyway, so that's a long-winded way of saying I think they'll probably cut 25, and they'll probably pitch it as, oh, this is a disappointment and a hawkish cut. I'm like, what the hell's a hawkish cut? If you cut interest rates, that's dovish. Full stop.
Oh, yeah, they're gonna say the balance of risks is coming into better balance, and we're going to be very data dependent moving forward, yada, yada, yada. Markets won't like that. Markets will tank. We know the story. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, if you know, not to open not to pick a scab, but I'm in a bad mood because of what a bunch of old white guys that never played football did to my team, right? Notre Dame on the field did everything they need to do. You told them the rules. They followed the rules. They finished in the right place to be in the playoff. And then you go behind closed doors and say, yeah, but my buddy in this conference did me a favor, and so I need his team. And even though they didn't win, bullshit. So I'm in a bad mood, but that's this kind of, but what they're doing now, ESPN is on this campaign of saying just lies, like the opposite of what actually happened on Sunday. And they think that if they can say it enough times, people will just say, oh yeah, that's the truth. And that is a danger in the digital age, right? If all day you're just getting stuff on your phone, the sky is green, the sky is green, the sky is green. Eventually you'll stop looking outside and you'll say, okay, the sky is green, because you just get worn down. And that's kind of what's happening. If you say, oh, 50 basis points, 50 basis points, 50 basis points, then somehow an unnecessary 25 basis points seems like a disappointment. Why? But that's we live in a world of narrative creation and exploitation and manipulation. And again, it's so the richest people can get richer, right? Because we'll see it. There'll be a tweet. I think the meeting's at 2:00, right?
Yeah.
So there'll be a trade at 1:30, 1:45, something like that, that will turn out to have known exactly what he was going to say. And someone will find it and they'll post it and say, hey, this person that somehow, and it's kind of like, remember December, whatever day, no, it was November 10th or whatever, when we had the big dislocation in crypto and the $19 billion of liquidations.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah, October 16th, and, immediately, or maybe it was November. I think it was October 16th,
May
and
16th, yeah.
literally an hour beforehand, someone put
Oh,
on a
5 minutes.
massive
No,
Bitcoin
5 minutes.
5 minutes
So
beforehand.
Trump
Massive Bitcoin short.
Trump
Yeah.
announces at 4:00 on a Friday. It's always 4:00 on a Friday, and then he reverses it on Sunday when the markets are closed and all that. But at 3:55, somebody goes mega short $400 million. So we know that that's happening and it's wrong. But again, if you can control markets through narrative, then if you have the knowledge of the narrative before it happens, you can actually do quite well. And then the other side is the guy who then gets super rich is Ken Griffin, because people will be scrambling to trade and he makes money on every trade. And then they'll be scrambling on the other side to unwind it. And then he'll make money on that. And then they'll be scrambling to do the secondary narrative that comes out and he'll make money on that. So That's why I like picks and shovels, right? I like to make money irregardless of the direction of price. I mean, I like to hold stuff forever, not not all Bitcoin should be held forever, but for your savings, right, your multi-generational wealth, yeah, that's a good thing to hold because you can borrow against it and you can use that to fund your lifestyle. That's what, again, super rich people do. Why does Jeff Bezos pay no taxes? Now, I don't know that he pays no taxes, but he pays low taxes. Well, because he doesn't have any income, right? And what he does is he borrows against his big hoard of stock, so he doesn't have to sell the stock. And actually, then you get to write off the interest expense on the money you borrow. So there's all these things that you can do if you have capital and knowledge and helpers and all that. And, it's like history's written by the winners, tax codes written by the rich people. So it's not surprising to me or anybody else that it's designed to keep rich people richer. And it's actually not designed to necessarily make poor people poor. That's what inflation does. But it's a tough place for us to be. And here's you know this too, right? Is the bread and circuses thing. Is how do you avoid, France with the pitchforks? How do you avoid revolution? Well, bread and circuses. You give people kind of free stuff and you entertain them. And so there's lots and lots of entertainment. And what I just don't want, and this is crazy, I'm going to talk about UBI and this is my point about Elon. He's like, oh, we'll just print a bunch of money and AI will solve poverty because we'll be able to print money and give it to people. Like, if that worked, wouldn't every country just do that? Wouldn't Zimbabwe be the richest country in the world? Like, I have in my office on the other side of the room, I have a 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollar bill. 100 trillion with a T. Remember, a trillion, you and I would have to keep talking for 31,710 years and spend $1 every second. That's 1 trillion. Okay? So I have a 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollar bill that would not buy a loaf of bread. So if it were true that printing money created wealth, then everyone would do it. So it doesn't work. But my fear is where we're headed is the Wall-E thing, where everybody's a big fat blob on a levitating thing looking at a screen and sipping their big gulps, because then you can't revolt. So if everybody's unhealthy and everybody's addicted to screens and everybody's not paying attention to reality and you're controlling the media, and don't get me started on this whole Ellison clan monopoly. It's like the new Rupert Murdoch. I mean, I hope Netflix wins and doesn't get overthrown by, but I'm afraid it's not going to go that way.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one too. I don't know. I don't mean to diverge too much, but so they just purchased Paramount, if I'm not mistaken. Several months ago, they just purchased Paramount. And now David Ellison, son of Larry Ellison, given a big check by his dad, is now going to try and purchase Warner Brothers. Hostile takeover. Netflix already announced that they closed some kind of deal with Warner Brothers. Now they're going to negotiate about it. What are your thoughts on that?
Control the media, control the world. And that's why Rupert Murdoch did it. And, we've all seen the Bond movie about him and the bad guy. But look, what's really interesting is for the most of like not all of human history, but because that's 10,000 years, but for the, few thousand years of civilized history, the church controlled the world. What do you mean? Well, we lived in clans. We didn't travel. There was no means of travel. And you had a local elder church, and you went and you were illiterate. And so you were told orally what to think and how to act. And you're like, okay, it's pretty good. And in exchange for protection and so life was okay. Well, then the printing press busted that monopoly. Right? Because now people could learn to read and we could transfer information across, expanses of time. We could carry a book to some other country. And so then media, state-owned, or state sponsored. Like in the United States, it wasn't state owned, but in my age, ABC, NBC, CBS, 6 o'clock news, three talking heads, didn't matter which one you watched, they all said the same thing. So it was a control mechanism, no different than North Korea or Russia or any place else. We look down on it because ours was open and free. I'm like, but it was controlled. So then the internet broke that monopoly wide open, right? Because if you think about it, in the old days, if I wanted to know about the Argentinian election, I had to wait for the New York Times to send someone to BA. She would write the story, send it back to her editor. 3 days later, it'd come out on the 17th page of the New York Times. Now I can go to a Periscope on Twitter and watch people standing in line chanting Macri's name and know that he's going to win. So that changed everything. And so the monopoly of state-owned media moved into the hands of internet companies, okay? Streaming companies. Well, they were diversified. Well, now people are trying to consolidate them again, because if you control the means of communication, you rule the world. And so why does OpenAI not give me the information I ask for? Because they're controlling the narrative. If you own all the media, okay, you can distribute what you want, the story you want. Why do 5 companies own all the food brands? It's really quite interesting. And then you look at the labels of what's in those foods. Like, some of that doesn't seem like it's very good for me. Well, why don't I just buy fresh food? Well, it's more expensive and it's harder to get, and it's not promoted by the same companies, and maybe it's been genetically engineered. And so there has always been a centralized control, and most cases with the threat of violence, right? You know, again, good Catholic boy. The Inquisition's not such a good part of our history. So there was, church's violence, but then there was government violence. And to this day, people are like, oh, I'm free. Like, I own my house. Really? Don't pay your property taxes. See what happens.
Right. Exactly.
Not yours anymore.
Yeah.
So again, I am not a fan of any one organization owning all the means of communication, which kind of, at least we had 3 back in the old days. Now it's getting too narrow. And the fact that it's one family makes me even more nervous. And the fact that there's some ideology involved there too is even more nerve-wracking to me. And, so it's a long conversation, but it's weird to me. It's weird, right? All the companies, like the first use of the internet, right, was porn. And it's weird that all the companies in that industry are owned by kind of this one set of families. And then what was really weird, this is another weird one, is when OpenAI said, okay, we're not going to allow people to use it for porn and other bad things. And then he changed his mind. Sam just like, no, knock yourself out. Like, again, why? Well, if you were to want to harm a society, attack the things that make societies great. Strong family values, strong relationships. And again, this is not new. This is crazy. So I saw this video, and it was in Russian. And so I am relying on the interpreter, but I figured if the interpretation wasn't right, someone would have, community noted it. But it was Putin giving a speech. And he was saying, why are you all surprised at this attack on family values and the nuclear family and gender issues and all this stuff? He said, this is not new. This is the Bolsheviks in 1910. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so I went back and I did some research, and I'm like, oh my God, the same stories, like could have, from 1910, you could be writing them now. And then 1913 is when the Fed was created, and it came from backing of a European. So it goes really deep, and you can go back multiple generations beyond that. And there is this, look, if you want to control something, there are only certain things you can do. You can have a bigger army, right? And that's how people conquered each other. You can have, again, access to information or control of the narrative that you distribute. I mean, you can use things like bribery but also you can homogenize and you can marginalize and you can weaken. Like if I wanted to control a population, would I want them to be really strong and healthy, or would I want them to be sick? I don't know. I'd probably pick sick. I mean, I'd rather fight a sick guy than a healthy guy or gal. If I wanted to, anyway, all of it's just kind of interrelated, and it goes to this singular control of anything. Back to the Fed. It's just bad, right? The market, all the market participants should determine interest rates. The market, all the providers of information should give us truth, right? Dialogue and debate in search of truth is better than being told what is true.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Very well said. No, it was a good deep dive, and it speaks a lot to the issues we're facing today, right? People addicted to media, people addicted to their screens. There was just a study that was published recently. I'm not sure if you read it, but potent cognitive decline experienced in those who consume short-form media content. So no major surprise there. But
that's another great one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Deep, meaningful reading. Deep, meaningful. When was the last time, and again, not to pick on you or me, but when was the last time you had a 2-hour conversation with somebody? Like just a deep, meaningful. In fact, what drives me, because we just had Thanksgiving and you're together with people you haven't seen, and you try, but it's all short. It's all clips. And what's crazier, like my wife's family's from Oklahoma, which is one of the reddest of the red. And I'm not, I think of myself as purple or colorless. I mean, purple, really. I don't like colorless. In fact, it drives me crazy that everything is going colorless. Like if you look at cars, 95% of cars are white, black, gray, and silver. Where are the green cars? Where are the orange cars? Where are the yellow cars? Where are the red cars?
Speaking of which, I should have painted this room a different color. The moment I painted it white, I realized, man, this looks like a hospital. This looks too sterile.
Everything's going that way. McDonald's used to be crazy colored. Now they're brown. But now the problem is, if somebody is one thing and someone else is another, you're actually not allowed to talk to each other, because people start from that, oh, you're wrong. And like, no. The dialogue isn't to convince the person of your opinion. A dialogue is to share and try to learn, because I am interested in what people think. And I actually think one of the things I've tried to do as an investor, and I think what separates the really good investors that I model myself after, is they would seek people who had different opinions than their own. Because I say, if two people always have the same opinion, one is unnecessary. So if you seek people who have a different view, whether it's politics, religion, anything, the price of a stock, the value of a company, you should explore those differences and really focus on trying to understand what a different view looks like. And a superpower is the ability to change your mind when presented with new information. And that's not a weakness. See, in society, we've made that a weakness. You're not allowed to change your mind. Like, on what planet is that a bad thing? It's not.
Absolutely. Very well said. Yeah, no, I think the ability to change your mind, but also the ability to hold two completely contradictory beliefs in your mind at the same time and
genius.
reconcile them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. I want to chat about Bitcoin really briefly. I know this is technically a Bitcoin show, but we really talk about tech more broadly. So I love the conversation we've had so far. The question I'll ask first is, 2025 is obviously wrapping up. We have 21 days left in the year, which sounds crazy to say. This year,
oh, that's awesome.
Coming into the year, I'm sure you had some thinking about what was going to happen in markets. What surprised you most about this year?
It's funny. What surprised me most is it went down almost exactly as I thought. I do this thing every January. I do some called the 10 surprises. And again, I stole the idea from Byron Wien. He did it for years at Morgan Stanley, and then he did it at Blackstone. God rest his soul, great man. And I, borrowed the idea, stole it, about 10 years ago. And so every January, and the idea of a surprise, it's not a prediction. It's basically you come up with what's the consensus on different issues, market or an asset. And then you come up with, if the opposite happened, right, the contrarian view, you could make a lot of money. So you think better than 50-50 chance of being right. But if it's right, you make. And Soros said this, right? It's not whether you're right or wrong. It's how much money you make when you're right and how much money you lose when you're wrong. So if you can make these asymmetric bets based on a differentiated view of the world, you can do better. So I do these 10 surprises, and one of them every year is Bitcoin. And so in January, I said, all right, so the 4-year cycle still exists. No one thinks it does. Everyone thinks it's dead because of institutionalization, yada, yada, yada. But the 4-year cycle is still alive because humans are going to human. And I think we'll push things to higher than fair value. So in the last 2 cycles, we went to 2 times fair value. So 10,000 fair value went to 20 in 17, then 33,000 in
Now, when you say fair value, just for our viewers, which model are you
Metcalfe's
discussing?
law, Tim
Metcalfe's law?
Peterson, N squared value, just a Metcalfe's law model, simple, take your inputs, put in Metcalfe's law, and you get a value. Because any network, whether it's a telecom network or a computer network or the Bitcoin network, can be valued according to Metcalfe's law, I believe. So you use that value, and it's 69 when it was 33. And I thought fair value by, this time would be around 100. It ends up, it's like 92 right now, but I figured it'd be 100. So I didn't think we'd get to 2 times. I thought there wasn't as much leverage because FTX went away and, BitMEX. And so I figured probably 1.5 to 1.7. So somewhere between 150, 170 kind of, and it's actually not a 4-year cycle. It's 3 years and 11 months. So it was December in 17, November in 21, and now it's going to be October. Now, I didn't like the guy who picked the day. Like he said October 6th. In 2023, he said October 6th was going to be the day.
Pretty remarkable. Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable. So he said it's just a simulation. I'm like, it's kind of feeling that way. And I got a lot of shit. And I said, look, 4th quarter is going to suck. And that stinks. But, then we'll be a quarter of the way through crypto winter, and next year in September-ish we'll head back to spring and then summer and then ultimately fall for the next big uptick when I think we hit 1 million. So every halving we basically add a 0. So we go from 10 to 100, going all the way back. Then we go from 100 to 1,000, then from 1,000 to 10,000 in 17. I mean, then in not in 17, in 21, and now to 100,000. 100,000 seemed like the right base level, and then we'll add another 0 at the next halving, and that's 1 million. And that's a 10x of the total adoption based on that Metcalfe's law curve. So I was not surprised. What I was surprised, where I was right-ish, is, so I'm going to score myself mostly right. So yes, we peaked. Yes, we're having a tough 4th quarter, but we didn't hit the 150 to 170. And I think that's because of manipulation. I knew that the spoofing of Bitcoin, what I mean by that is, it's a longer story, and I'm going to have to run here a second. If you think about, remember when we were deemed a commodity instead of a security, and everybody's like, yay! I'm like, no, be careful what you ask for. You might get it. Very bad thing. Not unintentional. That was absolutely intentional. And it goes all the way back to 2017. Leo Melamed, former president, now chairman emeritus of the CME, said famously in a speech, don't worry, we'll tame Bitcoin. I'm like, whoa. Time out. We don't need to be tamed. What are you talking about? And then shockingly, we were deemed a commodity. Well, why does that matter? Well, a security, you can't manipulate the same way you can manipulate a commodity in the futures market. In the futures market in commodities, whether it's oil or gold, you can do something called spoofing. And essentially, you can go naked short something and cap the price, and you can create this illusion of activity because people don't know the difference between spot and future, and the futures price is always higher than spot, and it rolls down over the course of the month. Long story short, it's been happening in gold forever. And JP Morgan actually paid $1 billion fine 3 years ago. And they're like, yeah, whatever, because it's illegal. But they're like, yeah, but we made 20 billion. So it's just 5% cost of doing business. So whether it's JP Morgan or BlackRock, it doesn't really matter. But someone's been spoofing, and that capped the upside more than I thought. And I think the leverage was actually even lower than I thought. So we only got to 126. But the good news, so you flip that the other way, the good news is if you get to 2 times fair value, you're going to have a 75% correction, maybe even 80. If you're only 30% above fair value, maybe you get a 50% correction. So maybe we could get down into the 60s, but I think 70s is more likely. Now, people are saying, Mark, you're crazy. We're going to the moon. Okay, great. I'll be happy if that happens. But, my view is the fair value is going to continue to accrete as more users, more nodes, more transactions, and, oh, God forbid, more things stored on the Bitcoin blockchain because it's a perfect store of value, proof of work. People hate that. But if there's empty block space, why wouldn't you want to store stuff on it? It's the safest place to be. I don't really understand a lot of these chains. It's literally a pointer to an AWS server. That is not on chain.
Decentralized, yeah.
Right. That is not decentralized. That is subject to Jeff waking up one morning and saying, no access
We're
for
shutting
you.
you down. Yep.
I mean, look, silly, comparison, but I was at the airport, a couple weeks ago, and I went to buy coffee. Starbucks said, nope, can't sell you coffee. What do you mean you can't sell me coffee? System's down. Like, you can't take cash? Like, nope, can't even open the cash register because system's down, because AWS was down. Okay, that's bad. That's not decentralized. That's centralized. So I like proof of work. Look, it doesn't mean I hate Ethereum. It doesn't mean I hate Solana. Look, Solana was very, very good to me. Thank you, Kyle and Tushar. I mean, they made us a lot of money in Solana. But I still have the problem that Solana goes down. And that isn't acceptable if I'm trying to use it for monetary purposes. So they need to fix that. And they say, well, it only goes down when it's used a lot. That's kind of the point. I mean, that's kind of the point. But, and again, it's not a criticism. It's just technology you don't snap your fingers and turn it on. Netflix almost went bankrupt twice. Their first business model was discs, CD-ROMs. They would get broken, they'd get lost, you'd forget about it, it would fall down the couch, you'd have to pay the fine. It was a bad system. Then they had video on demand. The problem was it took 4 days to download a movie. No one will wait 4 days. And your computer would crash 3 times while you're trying to do it. So it just didn't work. But then broadband, South Korea invented this thing around broadband, and well, that works. And so now everybody Netflixes. Great. Because it's better to be able to watch a show when you want to watch it instead of watching it at the time. Like when I was growing up, 8 o'clock Tuesday night, Happy Days, I'm sitting in front of the TV with my TV tray. I'm watching Happy Days. And ABC owned me. And they owned all the ad revenue, and they were super popular and super valuable. All their value, literally all of it, ABC, and now with the ESPN debacle, more value is going to end up at Netflix. So, dumb people do dumb things.
Yeah, very well said. The value of decentralized systems. Before you go, Mark, one other question that feeds into this last question I asked you about 2025. Per the name of the show is Over the Horizon. I like to ask folks what they're looking at, whether it's next year or in the years to come. You've talked about AI before. What are you looking at in 2026 and beyond as it pertains to Bitcoin, AI, and markets more broadly?
Yeah, look, so a couple things. So on the horizon, and again, I do love the name of the show, because that is where you need to look. And although I do think it's funny, so 2 summers ago, I went shopping for alternative venues, shall we say. In the event that we did a CBDC and we got really ugly and we got, it's like, where else would I want to live? So I went to Costa Rica and I went to Portugal. And I loved them both. Costa Rica, still a little bit too third worldy if didn't feel safe 100% of the time. Portugal, move there tomorrow. Unbelievable. But I was standing on the westernmost part of the continent, looking out at the horizon. I'm like, who the hell got on a ship and just sailed? Like the courage of that. So to have courage, and the point of this is to look at the horizon and say, I want, that's hard. It's way easier to say what's right in front of me or what everyone else is doing. It's the comfort of the herd. But so the horizon for us in the ABCD, so data is the new oil. Like literally data is the new oil. So anything related to data is important. But data, like oil, under the ground is not very valuable. You got to extract it, you got to process it, you got to refine it, you got to distribute it. That's what the other three things do. So the companies that help us use data are where we're looking. So blockchains organize and store data. So anything that helps us get data in a more usable fashion, in a decentralized, safe fashion where the, can't be seized or confiscated, love that. Then you need to process it. So processing is where we're really focused now, and this is chips. So in chips, GPUs were not designed to do thinking, right? They were designed to process images, to make video better. Look, CPUs process words serially. Pictures worth 1,000 words, so GPUs are better, but they're still serial left to right, and they use a lot of power. Like your brain, 20 watts. 24/7, 365, 90 plus years if we're lucky, 20 watts. So all this nonsense about, we need 10 nuclear power plants, wrong. We just need to use a different system. So chips, we are super hot on things using photonics. We're super hot on chips that are using these open source approaches as opposed to GPUs are great at training. Okay, but inference is different. Like training, it's like reading a book. You and I read a book, right? Pick one on my shelf. It takes me a month. It takes you a week. It doesn't really matter. We both read the book and we get the same information. But if we're trying to decide to cross the street, it's got to be instantaneous or you die. So inference, decision-making, is not about speed. So GPUs aren't really good at that. You need TPUs or VPUs or LPUs. So we're super high on a company, Grok, that makes LPUs. We like the TPU companies. Gemini just, obliterated ChatGPT with their new Gemini that's all trained on TPUs. That's bad for Jensen. But it doesn't mean GPUs are going away tomorrow. It's just, we're just going to keep innovating. And then we're going to get to photonics. There's this one company, Neurophos, Bill Gates and Microsoft are, coming in behind us. I think that's going to be unbelievable. And it's just a kid who said, my wife said, you shouldn't call him a kid. I'm like, he's 30 years old. I mean that in a loving, affectionate and complimentary and I admire him. I mean, he said, well, all this stuff gets super hot. And it's because the electrons have to go across back and forth. So why not use photons? And then there's no heat. People say you can't do that because it's silicon. So well, what if I put liquid crystal on the silicon? Oh, that'll never work. Well, I did it in my lab and it turns out it works. So photonics and speed of light and that gets into quantum and all this thing. So, quantum, we're actually having a webinar today at 3:00 on a quantum company we invested in. Quantum's a long way off, like a long way off. Like right now, the best quantum computer is less good than my Pentium 486 from 1991. So it's not good, but it's coming. And all those quantum stocks, they're scams. Run away from them fast. They're bad. Quantum in the future, there'll be some good stuff, but those stocks like Rigetti just. And then in the AI space, look, AI is a tool. It's just a tool. And it's like my 8th grade computer teacher. I love this. This is back in Kamiakin Junior High in, Kirkland, Washington, where I grew up before it was cool. And he said, a computer is as smart as a screwdriver. And it's true, right? It has no brain. It has no intelligence.
Tool is
And
only as good as the person that's using it.
is only as good as the person. Humans with AI tools, superhuman. Do stuff faster, do stuff better. It's great. Like any tool. Like I can lift more with a lever than I can by myself, right? So tools, great. But this idea that suddenly we're going to have, Terminator and AI is going to take over the world, I'm just not, I'm not a believer, because the bottom line is the brain doesn't work in 2 dimensions. It doesn't work left to right. It works in 3 dimensions, and 3 dimensions are hard, right? It's a hard problem. And the real story, and this is a topic for another day because I do got to go, but the topic for another day, the king of AI, Jeffrey Hinton, right? Nobel Prize, all this stuff, and all the people that are making billions of dollars worked for this guy at Google. So awesome. Across the hall from him at City College of London was this guy, Carl Friston. And Carl was not a comp sci, he was a neuroscientist. And he's like, Jeffrey, it's wrong. I mean, your brute force approach, we just need to throw more chips at it linearly. That's not how the brain works. And the simple way to think about it is right now, behind me, behind you, there's all this stuff, right? But our brain doesn't process all that. It doesn't process what's going on outside of my, library here. It doesn't process what's going on across the street from you. It only processes what we're focused on. So it actively excludes 90, 95, 98% of the processing. That's not what a GPU has to process it all over and over and over and over. And that's a dumb, based, inefficient way of trying to think. And so thinking is very different than processing. And so, yes, most of AI is artificial, but none of it is actually intelligent. It's faster, it's speedier. Like it can read Shakespeare faster than I can. It can get all the information on reflection.ai, unless it's at DeepSeek. And I mean,
Right.
unless it's at OpenAI, then they won't give it to me because it's a competitor, which I'm still so pissed about that. It's just ridiculous.
Insane.
But anyway, so that's why I use DeepSeek under threat of jail, right? Remember when DeepSeek came out and that senator tried to get a law passed that if you were an American citizen using it, you could go to jail?
Mhm.
Like, shut the hell up. I mean, everything. How many products in your house were made in China?
More
Right?
than half.
Exactly.
Easily.
So stop with the nonsense. I mean, look, governments need enemies. So we have to make up an enemy so we can sell lots of missiles and guns and defenses. But I'll leave you with this. So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I don't remember the exact date, and I wasn't there in the room. For all of human history, right, from Portugal, back to Portugal, the Portuguese were the most powerful country in the world. They had the world reserve currency, the most powerful navy because they had the tallest trees, they had the fastest navy. And then Spain took them over, and then France took them over. Then then the Netherlands took them over. Now, how does the Netherlands take over Spain? Spanish Armada, most powerful navy in the world. How does a country the size of Ohio take them over? They invented fiat currency. They printed money out of thin air. They gave this fake money to mercenaries who then out and took over the Spanish. And the Netherlands was the center of the universe for about 70 years. Crazy, crazy. And then Napoleon, you've seen the movie, took them over. And then the UK took them over because they got the steam engine. And then we got nuclear power. So we're the superpower. 15 years ago, and the world reserve currency was secured by ships. 15 years ago, China said the world reserve currency is not going to be secured by ships. It's going to be secured by chips. So they now are focused on 5G, AI, and we are focused on social media and Instagram. We're awesome at that. I'd rather be awesome at 5G and AI. And we're getting better at AI, but they're the kings. And so the world order is shifting, and look, I want to live in Balaji's nation stateless world. I do, but we're probably not going to get there anytime soon. So as long as they don't go to CBDC and take all my privileges away, I'll be okay. I finally broke out of Twitter jail. I was in Twitter jail for almost 2 years for
That's
saying
good.
some things people didn't like. And I wasn't complying with the algorithm. It's just funny. I actually asked Grok, how do I get out of Twitter jail? And it said, okay, you got to do this, got to do this. And I did it, and it actually worked. That was kind of cool.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I noticed that you need to comment a lot more. I think you need to comment, you
Yes.
need to engage a lot more. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
interesting. Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming on. This was a wide ranging discussion. Pleasure to have you. Before you go, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you
Yeah.
and see
So
more?
on Twitter, I'm at Mark Yusko. I'm not a nameless, faceless PFP. I have a PFP, but I'm at Mark Yusko. Our website's morgancreekcap.com. There's some stuff out there. I'm pretty easy to reach by DM. I suck at email. But I'm around, and I've done a lot of stuff content wise. So, you can search and find stuff on the internet. I like to talk, obviously. And although it's funny, I'll leave it as the last story. So my wife see me speak once. She came to Vegas for a conference once, and at the end she said, "You can't say things like that." Like, what I say? She says, no, it's not what you said. It's how you say things. Like, what do you mean? She says, well, you say things so forcefully. I'm like, well, what's wrong with that? She says, well, people will believe you. I'm like, it's kind of the idea. She says, well, what if you're wrong? I'm wrong all the time. I just changed my mind. I mean, so uh, I have strong opinions loosely held. I like to share. I like to talk, but there's lots of content out there if people are interested.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on, Mark. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.